My demonstration tonight is on basically a Celtic knot, but more than just a Celtic knot. The insertion of different pieces of wood into accenting pieces of wood into your pieces is what makes for a different setup. This is a Celtic knot, and it's a leaded box. Last year I decided to make Christmas ornaments, and I wanted to run straight through. So in going straight through, that gives you this type of a setup. Ah, now I see it. Okay. And this was 4-sided. Then I went with 8-sided, and that gave me this. And you can kind of see how the pieces went by looking at the end, where they're straight across, and all I did was just insert pieces into it to make that. I made some sample boards that I wanted to be able to tell what it was going to do. So this is 4-sided here. I've got 45 degree, 35 degree, and 22.5 degree. The 35 and 45 I cut on my table saw. This one, the 22.5, I cut on my bandsaw. So some people even use a miter saw. It's just however you want to cut it and get the most accurate. I like to leave about 1/8 of an inch to stabilize the piece. And I'll show you how I do that here in a little bit. But this is 4-sided. This is 6-sided, and you can tell a big difference between them. And this is 8-sided. Just to give me an idea how long it was going to be and so forth. You can actually go to probably on a long piece. I only went 45 degree on my leaded box, so it doesn't take very much to make a pretty wide piece. Okay, on my table saw, you'll notice I use a miter gauge on mine with a stop block. I don't make enough of them to where it pays to make a sled. Some guys on YouTube and stuff, you'll see them make up sleds so that they get the exact perfect. As long as I don't move that piece and change the angle, everything's going to be the same, and I'll make all my cuts before I ever take it off the saw. Number 2. There we go. I don't know if you can see it or not. It's kind of shaded, and I apologize, but this is my bandsaw. And that's what I cut my 22.5 degree, because I wanted a thinner kerf because it was going to be so small that I was afraid that with the 1/8 inch kerf it might be just one solid color. So I made a smaller kerf, like about 1/16 of an inch, where the table saw is about 1/8 of an inch. But that's how I get these different pieces, and again, I don't move I also use a miter gauge on my table saw, and that's how I get these real thin pieces. And again, I don't take it off the saw until I'm made all my cuts. First thing to start out with is getting everything squared up. Number 3, please. You see how on the table saw I'm squaring the sides, and number 4, and I also want the ends squared. You want to make sure that everything is perfectly square when you start out, and when you make that goes along with the 6-sided and the 8-sided. You want everything as perfect as you can make it. The better your square, the better the outcome. But after I get everything squared up, then I want to make my insert pieces. And for that, number 5, please. That's where I've got everything squared up and ready to go. Okay, now number 6. Number 6, I want the width as close to exact as my piece that I'm making, so that when I put it in, I can actually butt it up against a piece, and I'll show you here in a minute where I glue it up. But I want to be able to set it in, but I still want some sticking out, so I've got something to handle it with. But when I make my slats, I will cut it to width, and then I'll cut the thickness. And I take a waste block, take this waste block, and I'll make the saw cut in it to give me how thick the saw cut's going to be, so that I know how to size my slats that I'm going to put into it. And you want the slats snug, but you don't want them so tight that you have to force it down in there. Just want it to work in. And I've got the 1/8 inch and the 1/16 inch in here that I use to cut that. Number 7. That's where I'm slicing it, making the thin. Number 8. You can see how thin I'm making it. Number 9. This is where I've got my test block. Number 10. And the slats that I need for the different pieces. Number 11. This shows how I make my cuts, and this is my first cut. Now if I'm running a small piece, like I am here, I will take and number 12. You can't see it on the end, but on one end I'll make an X. On the X, it tells me which end I'm using for the stop block. If I don't tell me which end is the stop block and I grab the wrong end, it's going to throw the whole thing off. Being perfectly center is kind of difficult. I'm not saying impossible, just difficult. But that's how I keep everything centered up and keep it squared up against my stop block. Yeah. 13. 13, this is where I think I've got this one set at a 45-degree angle and making my first cut, which is the same as this one when it comes out. And I like to cut it short by about 1/8 of an inch. That keeps stability in my piece. I find that if I cut it totally in two, I have troubles getting it to line up. This particular piece that I've got here that I'm going to turn tonight, I did cut all the way through, and we'll see how good I am at gluing back together. But this is my first piece. It's got the first one already glued in, and I make my second piece and it's ready to glue in. I like to cut it about 1/8 of an inch short by about 1/8 of an inch, maybe even a little less, so that I've got a little wiggle room. I can pry it open a little bit when I put my glue on my slat. I can work it in, pull it back together, work it around so that I get the glue worked in good. I've tried CA glue. In fact, I did it with the 22.5 degree, and CA glue is fine, but I just had troubles with it. My personal preference is the I'm sorry? Tight bond, thank you. My personal preference is the tight bond, and I know from past experience with tight bond, where I was doing my segmenting If I took and hand pieced it together, held it for 15 seconds, by 30 seconds you can't hardly pull it apart. So give it 30 minutes to set and you're ready to make your next cut with Titebond Original. Now this shows that. Okay, then the glue up. Once I get it together, then I want to glue it up. And I will use something flat that is perfectly square on one side. And what I did was I took and put packing tape on it so that the glue wouldn't stick to it. And when I glue it up, I get it so that it's my piece is left down. The area I've got left uncut is down, so that I can put this piece in, pull it up against here, and that gives me something to help keep everything square. Can you see all that? If I want to pull it together, I'll take a clamp and put in the center, give it light pressure, not real taut and not real tight, unless you're trying to pull something back into line. But just light pressure from both the side and the ends, just enough to where the glue starts to squish out. Once I get to that point, then I can move on to, I always try to number it. 1, I don't know if you can see that or not. 1, 2, 3, and 4. That way I know which direction I'm going, so that I'd keep turning the same direction all the time. Now with the straight ones, you'll see that I cut this one so that it just cuts straight through, glue it up, and I leave the 2 corners on it because that helps me keep everything square. If I take those corners off, then I'm trying to fit it just to the center, and that's a little bit harder. But as long as you keep everything square, you're going to come out fairly decent. For the 8-sided one, I had it set up so that, in fact I showed this at I think Jigs and Fixtures last year, but it was set up so that I could cut it. This is a little bigger one. The ones that I actually cut were a little smaller. But it goes in like so. Get rid of this so we can see. Goes in kind of like so that it held it at a where the corners were perfectly up and down and perfectly across. That would let me make my next cut. And I wanted it at the same depth as the first cuts, so that the center would remain equal. Any questions so far?
Lots of work.
Unfortunately, there is very little turning in Celtic knots, as you'll see. It's not a lot of turning, but it definitely makes some interesting shapes. Yes?
Mike, I've made a few of these and I love it. You're doing great. With the glue, I'm going to really echo that. Stay away from the CA glue. It is not the glue to use for this particular project.
I have to agree with you.
I'm using the Quickset Titebond right now, and that I think would be really a great product for this.
The CA glue I used was that Parfix, and it's got an inhibitor in it. Instead of 3 seconds, you've got 8 seconds on it. And but if you use the activator on it, I mean, it's instant. So you don't want to use activator when you're trying to slide something together, because chances of you not making it are pretty good.
Well, the other problem is the CA is fragile, and if somebody drops your bottle stopper with a nice Celtic knot, it's going to blow apart.
Exactly. Well, I tried doing the CA glue, and I wanted it because it does set fast. I tried cutting the next piece after about 5 minutes, and the CA glue hadn't set. I don't know why, but the CA glue hadn't set, and I had to put it all back together. I ended up waiting at least 15 minutes before I could make my next cut. And 30 minutes with the tight bonds, so as far as I'm concerned, the tight bond's the way to go. It's a lot stronger and it's not near as brittle.
What kind of wood do you use? Any particular wood?
I'm sorry?
Any particular kind of wood?
As long as it's a contrasting wood so that your design shows up, that's all that matters. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
In your process, when you put in the one wedge and you let it set up, are you then sanding or cutting off the scrap?
Usually I've got the piece sticking out, like I do. Yeah, I usually have it sticking out about like so when I'm done. So I'll take, and usually I'll just run over to my bandsaw, but not everybody's got a bandsaw. So as long as you take a good sharp knife and cut it down flush, that's all you need. But I take my bandsaw, and a lot of times I've still got the, I can set up the fence and just run it down my fence, and that helps keep it square. Good question, thank you. Anybody else? Okay, well, let's see how good a job I did on this then. First thing we want to do is find as close to the exact center as we can. The closer to the center you can, the better off you're going to be. So I'm going to take and I'll go crossways. Crossways. That should give me my center. But just to be on the safe side.
Mark?
Yes.
Move toward your headstock.
How's that, better?
Kind of. There, here you go. Now a little bit.
Okay.
Move it to your headstock a little bit more. There you go. Yeah.
Okay. Now, just to be on the safe side, I take and pull it out there to about the center. And I will take and mark all four sides just to make sure that center point is the center point. Looks good. The reason I do it from the side also is I have had it be off just a little bit, and that little bit can create a problem. All right. Now we're ready to see how good a glue job I did. Are we taking any bets? Okay, now on this one, after I got in my 4 corners to make my Celtic knot, I went ahead and stepped in about 1/8 of an inch and put in some flat ones across it so that it actually will give it a border like what I did here.
Mike, could you turn that just one full slow revolution? Okay, thank you.
Starting to turn out. Now you can see it was the Celtic knot was actually 1/8 of an inch outside of here. Now it's down to almost flush on my flats. Just to give you an idea on how much you're actually reducing the size. Now it's below it. And let's see how well I did gluing here. Not too bad. All my corners come together right like they should. I have had them be quite a ways apart, but every one of these are close enough that I don't think anybody will ever see any difference. Cool. All right, I'm going to quit there on this one. And then for something different, I'm going to turn this one. This just got the flat sides so you can get kind of an idea on how it looks. So again, I want the end grain. That one's a little better. All right. See how well this one turns out. It's working on it. Okay. Now we're going to start making it come into shape. Ta-da! And these points are touching here. I can either leave it there or I can do like I did on the other and just cut it down a little bit so that they're each individual, which is what I normally do. What do you think, guys?
Pretty cool. Right.
Okay, it's you're limited only by your imagination on these things, guys. Take it home, try it, and see what you think. The main thing is to get your slats the same size as the kerf of your saw blade that you're making your slots with. Once you get that and get it all glued up, as you can see, the turning is a minor part. That's it.